Welcome in, everybody out there listening to episode 2 of the Pocket Aces podcast. My name is Doug. My main man Sean is our co-host.
How you doing, guys?
Hey, so just tuning in here for episode 2. Again, thank you so much. If you like anything that you hear or you want to shoot anything back at us, please do. Like, subscribe, comment on YouTube, like us on Facebook. So, Sean, episode 1, good time talking about all of the Atlantic City casinos as they currently are. Also, some casinos talking about what they were. So, just to kind of recap, favorite Atlantic City casino for you?
Ocean.
Ocean.
Sure.
So, what about Ocean since it's only been open for about 10 months?
Just everything about the casino, how big it is. You know, everything's wide open. All the restaurants, the poker area, and definitely the sports book.
Absolutely. I think it's the best sports book in Atlantic City, which in a little bit we'll actually get into something where they might have some competition coming up soon. So, me personally, I was torn between Borgata and Hard Rock for a number of reasons on both sides. So, I would say Borgata won. Actually, I'd say Borgata 1A, Hard Rock 1. I think Hard Rock's over the edge a little bit for me, just because I think they have a little bit more than Borgata. So, Sean, today's topics, we're going to do a little Atlantic City news, just a tiny bit, and then the main topic of the day, our favorite gambling and casino-related movies. Ironically, I think your list and mine share 3. And then we'll do a little preview of the World Series of Poker since we're here in May now. We're just not too far off from the beginning. I believe it kicks off on May 30th. And then we'll also talk a little NHL, NBA playoffs as well. See if there's any lines or anything that stands out for you. In terms of some sports betting as well, we'll get into since we are going to talk about that here on this show as well. So, Atlantic City news, Sean, first off, let's get into it. Speaking of Ocean, a good segue, a recent article from Wayne Perry of the Associated Press. Great job. Shout out to Wayne for the amazing job he does with the AP and with the Atlantic City information that he talks about. Article posted a while back, not too far back, but a little bit. Atlantic City's Ocean Casino finally making money, expected to turn a profit in May for the first time since opening last June, so almost a full year now. Ironically, it starts off as the Ocean Casino Resort, which until a few weeks ago was known as the Ocean Resort Casino. They've been able to reduce their debt and will turn a profit here in this month of May. So, Sean, one of the things that I want to ask you, kind of going over this article, what do you think, since you talked about Ocean, I know what draws you, but what do you think draws people to Ocean? What is drawing people to Ocean now that wasn't drawing them 6 months ago? What is allowing them to turn a profit?
I think it's mostly their hospitality, to be honest. I noticed when I went there for my birthday with my brother, compared to other casinos in AC that I've stayed at, I noticed that Ocean pays more attention to their hotel and how their employees treat guests. I feel like that their hospitality is like 100% like grade A quality, and I think that attracts people and attracts tourists.
Definitely something that will get people through the doors. And, one of the things that this article goes on to talk about is how Bruce Dyfick, the previous owner, unfortunately, as we mentioned in episode 1, passed away at the beginning of April after from what people come to understand, sounds like some unfortunate financial woes. Luxor Investment, or investment firm, they're actually a hedge fund out of New York, I believe, taking over, dumping $70 million into Ocean to not only update some of the rooms. What some people don't know about Ocean is, if you look, especially at night, the middle floors are dark. I believe they still have 500 hotel rooms that they did not even finish, that Revel didn't even finish. So their plan is to fix up some of those rooms, open 500 additional rooms before the summer, I believe. And then from what it says here, 50 million of that 70 is going to pay down debt. So I think that's certainly helping to reduce the debt load. So just one of the other things that this article mentions, and I remember at the time it was posted, Ocean is actually going to be doing a new escalator case, I believe. Escalator case. That's not a word. A new escalator from the hotel floor to the casino floor. Now, you've been there a little bit more than me because you stayed there. obviously one of the ways to get to the hotel is to just go up the escalator that's in the main part of the building that has the cool sparkly stuff, whatever that is,
Yep.
hanging down. Where else, from what you were able to see, where else would they put an escalator? I mean, I don't think that means they're updating the escalator because the escalator is not old. I think that means they're adding a new one. Can you think of anywhere that they would add a
I
new
would
escalator?
say if anywhere on the casino floor, if they can like connect it from the casino floor up to the hotel level. And also, other than the escalators, I know there's an elevator right near the escalators that
Yeah.
go from the boardwalk to like the hotel level.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's definitely interesting to hear that they're going to do that. One of the main complaints about Ocean and even Revel at the time it opened was people were saying like it's laid out so bizarre. To come off the boardwalk, you have to go up to get to the casino. It's not something that a lot of people were and still aren't fond of. One of the other things the article goes on to mention is they're adding 200 new slot machines, which amazes me. It feels like there's slot machines everywhere. And then Memorial Day weekend, we actually talked about this in episode one. Memorial Day weekend, they open a speakeasy. They're going to open a speakeasy club that'll be like a burlesque type of a thing. Plus, it says tabletop gaming, which to me sounds like they might have some blackjack tables in there. But very exciting for that to see a nightclub turn into someplace that I think more people will be interested to spend. So it sounds like there's some other things that they're going to do. One of the things that we talked about in episode one was the fact that they really could afford to change their marketing scheme and maybe get more people in the door. Well, this article mentions a quote from an employee. I believe it's the CEO of the interim CEO who's managing the property, mentions that customers are now going to get offers from the casino 7 days a week rather than one. So, Sean, we did talk about this last episode. As someone who likes going to Ocean, what would you want to be offered by Ocean? What would you want to get in the mail one day to draw you to go down there? Like, what would it take for them to be like, yeah, hey, come down? What would you like to see?
Anything from free play to a free restaurant comp or even a free room.
Yeah, certainly. Free is nice. One of the things we talked about is how sometimes I think Atlantic City casinos miss out on opportunities to get people in the door for concerts. Certainly, if I were to buy tickets to a concert at Ocean, I wouldn't mind if they said, "Hey, here's an $89 room fee," or whatever it is, or book the room, don't pay fees, or something like that, just to get people in the door. One other little tidbit of Atlantic City news before we move on to our main topic. Bally's is investing I believe it is something like a 15 million. I think it's something like $15 million or $11 million. Let me see if I can find it. They are finishing off their sports books. The sports books at Ocean, not Ocean. We just talked about Ocean. The sports books at Bally's and Harrah's are temporary. But this picture here is really impressive. An artistic rendering of the book at Bally's. The 15,000 square foot space will be opening not too long from now in June. $11 million is going to be put in by CET, Caesars, as construction of two permanent sports books, including one that will be the largest in the city. So you mentioned how you would like to see, you think Ocean is the best. I think it is as well. But what do you think Bally's needs to do to maybe overtake Ocean? What would you want to see Bally's do to make you kind of change your mind about that? Is there anything you can think of, or do you just like Ocean that much?
I can't really think of anything Bally's could do to overtake it. But as you said in the article, it's saying that Bally's will be the biggest sports book in AC.
Yeah, 15,000 square foot sports book at Bally's will be the largest in South Jersey and possibly the state of New Jersey. I think their goal is to even overtake the sports book that's at Monmouth Racetrack, because I believe I think that's the biggest one. I think their goal is to outdo that. Apparently, they want to have a LED video screen 18 feet high and 98 feet in length that can be seen from the boardwalk more than 100 yards away. So I think
that's pretty impressive in itself.
It absolutely is. It almost sounds like they want to say, "Hey, if you're walking past Boardwalk Hall, you can still see the video screen," which is just absolutely impressive. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things that I like about Ocean that I would maybe like to see Bally's do, Ocean has those little rooms upstairs. Have you ever seen? Do you remember when we went? They've got those rooms where people can go.
Yep.
I would like to see Bally's offer that in a public setting. So I think to get up there where that area is, it's private. You have to somehow book to get up there at Ocean. I would love to see Bally's offer a second, and I don't even know if it's possible because I think Mountain Bar and Wild Wild West is only one level. But if there was some way to give public access to like an upstairs balcony type area, I think that would be really cool. So obviously, sports betting, since being legalized about a year ago in New Jersey, has really taken off. I read somewhere back in April, I believe, the March Madness tournament brought in more money than the Super Bowl, which almost never happens. I mean, I don't think Vegas has ever made more money on March Madness than they do on the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl almost always takes the cake, but apparently in New Jersey, online and brick and mortar casinos taking home more money in March Madness. And I'll tell you, I was there day one of March Madness, and it was absolutely insane. So, just some great things happening in Atlantic City. Obviously, we'll touch base on some news in Atlantic City since we're from South Jersey. So, every episode we'll touch on that. So, Sean, let's get to our main topic here for episode 2: favorite gambling and casino related movies. Now, it doesn't have to be a movie that literally has gambling as the main feature. Obviously, I think 3 of our 5 that we have listed are the same. But you do have one that isn't really necessarily gambling related, and it's a movie that I didn't think of, but it's a movie I love to watch when I'm in a Vegas or gambling mood. So let's start with both of us, and mine wasn't in any particular order, but both of us have this movie listed as the first one. Actually, our first 2 are both exactly the same in the same order. Ocean's 11. So obviously, a remake of the Rat Pack movie from, I believe, the 50s or 60s. George Clooney, Matt Damon, just an absolutely all-star cast. Carl Reiner, who I think is actually still alive. So many big names, both, at the time and big names now. So what about that movie makes you, and it's the movie that I think we watch if we're sitting here playing cards. It's the movie that we always have to put on. What draws you to that movie? Because for me, it's one of those movies where I almost always feel like I have to watch it at least once a month. It almost seems like. What draws it, Sean, to you that way?
Oh, it's everything about it. The cast in it with, like you said, George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, Julia Roberts, Don Cheadle. It's the plot of it, how George Clooney gets together like a group of people to take down casinos, and it's a fact that they show clips in AC of George Clooney at
the Plaza,
and Caesars.
Yep.
Actually, at the former, it used to be called Forum Lounge, which I don't ever remember seeing when I was there. I think they closed it.
I think it, yeah.
But and then just seeing everything in Vegas. Actually watching it as a kid, I would be so excited to someday go to Vegas and see all that.
Obviously, you did get the opportunity to go to Vegas. I believe you sent me a picture of the Bellagio when you were there, which is very cool. One of the things that I like about the movie is how they tie in. I mean, obviously, Terry Benedict was not the owner of the Bellagio. Bellagio has been owned, I believe, by... Is it MGM that owns Bellagio? I don't remember who exactly owns Bellagio. I think it is MGM. And I think it's always been MGM. I don't think it's ever been an individual as they portrayed in the movie. But I think it's funny how they were able to put it in reality, base it in reality. They're trying to rob 3 casinos, the Bellagio, the Mirage, and the MGM Grand, who, yes, I believe now that I think about it, all 3 are owned by MGM. So they did base it somewhat in reality that it was 3 casinos that are very real casinos in Vegas. And I would not at all be surprised if the way the money is funneled in the movie is how it is in real life. All 3 of those casinos, they'll funnel their money into one vault. I'll never forget watching the movie for the first time. I think I sat there for 5 minutes after they did the reveal of how they pulled it off. I think my mouth was literally open for 5 minutes. I couldn't believe how they pulled it off. And Ocean's 12, which we're not going to talk about because it's not related to gambling at all. But Ocean's 12 kind of did it too, where it was like a mouth dropping, like, oh my God, that's how they did it. But Ocean's 11, I'll never forget. Sean, do you remember the first time you saw it? Kind of like, what was your thought process when you were like, oh my God, So like the SWAT guys are them. This is how they pull
Yeah,
it
how
off.
they videotape, they did a duplicate vault.
Yep.
To be honest, the first time I saw it, I was confused. I was like,
Yep.
"Wait, what's going on?" I had to watch it again
Yep.
just to fully get the gist of it.
Yeah, that scene where Terry Benedict says cue up the tape to the robbery and kicks the money aside, and there's the Bellagio logo, and then they played it, and it's just something that you don't look at.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny once you see the movie for the first time. Spoiler alert, by the way, if none of you out there while listening have seen it. You see them throughout the movie building that set, but you just don't put two and two together to think that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
You think they're practicing
That's what
to then rip the place off.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just really well done, and it was just it spawned Ocean's 12, which I think was an okay movie. I think the reason why they made Ocean's 13 was because a lot of people didn't like that Ocean's 12 had nothing to do with casinos. It was totally different, and I think they made Ocean's 13 to go back to casinos and stuff. But just it's a movie that no matter how many times I watch it, I enjoy it. It never gets old. It's downloaded to my iPad to watch anytime. I bought it off iTunes, and it's just a phenomenal, phenomenal movie if you haven't seen it. Moving on to the second, which ironically both of us have listed as number 2, is one of the best gambling movies, in my opinion, of all time, in Rounders. Another Matt Damon movie. Starting to think Matt Damon likes to gamble, or at least loves the atmosphere of gambling. Rounders, I believe it was released in '97. Matt Damon as Mike McDermott, a kind of like an underground New York poker player. Oh my god, it just completely skipped me. Who plays Worm?
Edward Norton.
Edward Norton. Thank you. I almost said Eric Bana. Wrong. That's the wrong Hulk. Yeah, and then obviously John Malkovich is in it. And I don't remember who the girl is. She was in the Blacklist Redemption. I can't remember what her name is. But obviously a pretty well-known cast at the time, and from what I understand, they filmed the movie pretty quick. But still a cast that was pretty known at the time. I think, if I remember correctly, it came out the same year as Saving Private Ryan, which Matt Damon was also in. So it had to compete with that. So, Sean, what are some of your favorite movies? Because, again, it's a movie that we always watch when we play cards kind of in the background. What draws you to Ocean's 11? I'm sorry. We did that already. What draws you to Rounders? What makes it an always watchable movie for you?
For me, well, since it's focused on poker, and I love poker.
Oh, of course.
So I love that aspect of it, and just the way he tells the story of like how he got into poker and how he made his way up to eventually getting in the WSOP tournament, and then seeing the clip in the poker room of Taj Mahal, the former Trump Taj Mahal. It was just really cool.
So yeah, absolutely. I think that's what we mentioned in episode 1. Drew us to the poker room at the Taj. Obviously, seeing that movie, I think it's kind of like a rite of passage as a poker player if you had the opportunity to play in that poker room. Obviously, Rounders, kind of the beginning of the poker boom in the late 90s and early 2000s. Just a great movie, and I agree the story's told so well. It starts with him, he loses to Teddy KGB and then has to spend the whole movie trying to get everything back, and then finally he goes, you know what, I'm going back to where I lost it all, and he eventually gets it all back. We could do an entire episode on this movie and my thoughts on why, Mike McDermott, would you sit down at a table with 30 grand and risk all of it. First off, I think he plays the hand against Teddy KGB terribly at the beginning of the movie. I know he has, if I remember correctly, he has 9s full of aces, and Teddy checks the whole way, and then the ace comes, or something comes up on the end, and Teddy magically decides to bet, I believe it's 15 grand. Mike McDermott, why would you, after him checking so much, why would you automatically just shove? He shoves all in. So Teddy checks, and then after the river decides to bet 15 grand out of nowhere. And you don't sit there for a second and think, okay, maybe he has something better than me. There is an ace out there and 2 9s. You don't ever think that maybe he's trying to play, he had pocket aces and was trying to slow roll him from the beginning. So, and I'll never understand why would you shove? I mean, you kind of have to, because if you're going to raise, you have to raise to it, because it was a $15,000 bet. You'd have to raise to at least 30K. Um, I just don't understand why you would not at least call. Just call and see if you have him beat or not. But that then it wouldn't be a movie. So, anything else that draws you to the movie in terms of the characters? Is there any one character that you relate to, or having played poker, is there any memorable scene in the movie other than the Taj poker room scene? Is there anything that any one particular hand or anything that stands out to you, Sean?
Not any specific hand.
Any specific hand? So,
Uh,
one of the questions that I actually have it, I have it here. The professor, I think, is one of my favorite characters, because I think he's so full of knowledge and he gives Mike a lot of great knowledge. One of my favorite lines in the movie is, "You can't run away from who you are. Your destiny, our destiny chooses us." I think the professor is the shoulder angel for Mike, I guess you could say. Worm is the shoulder devil telling him what not to do, but he does it, and the professor's the one trying to give him the good advice. So just if you haven't seen it, if you're a poker player, you gotta check it out. Fantastic movie, start to finish. It's a movie that I wish they had always done a sequel to. Um, I myself have even dreamt up a sequel at one time in my head. Of long story short, it was an idea that I had a while back. Uh, Starting the movie off with Mike going to the World Series, losing like in one event, like he got to like the top 20 or something and busted out, and then the rest of the movie, if you couldn't get any of the original characters back, you base the rest of the movie on like some other up and coming kid who idolizes Mike McDermott. So it's a movie I always wish they would do a sequel to. Um, like unlike Ocean's 11, where it spawned two true sequels, and then Ocean's 8, which is only kind of related. So moving on from there, Sean, I believe you have. I thought you had one of my other ones. I thought we had three of the same. So you added The Gambler, which was one
Yeah.
of my honorable mentions.
Mhm.
So you crossed out 21 and put The Gambler. So
Mhm.
since I have 21 on here, let's talk about 21. Great movie. Came out in the late 2000s. Kevin Spacey in not the main role, but Kevin Spacey was probably like the most well-known person in the movie. Lawrence Fishburne as well as the kind of Vegas bad guy. So what movie about that? It's not poker related. It's blackjack. But what draws you to that movie? Because it's another movie that we always seem like we have to watch.
I guess just like the other movies, how it's like in the casino setting, and how they're able to count cards like that, and like just the intensity of it, how they're able to rack up the money.
Yeah, what always amazed me about that movie is the fact that real casinos, like I think when you were in Vegas, you actually tried to send me a picture of an area that's in the movie to ask me if that area was like when you were there, is that the same way it looked in the movie?
Mm-hmm.
What always amazed me about that movie is that these very real casinos allowed the filmmakers to essentially give people full on tips about how to gamble. Like I know one of the things you have written down is the Las Vegas TV show, which was based in a casino that didn't really exist. It was a made up casino, the Montecito, I believe, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it always amazed me that Hard Rock is in 21. I believe Planet Hollywood is too. These very real casinos allowed the filmmakers to essentially tell people, yeah, here's a way to count cards, and then like people could literally just take from that movie and go count cards in any casino. It always amazed me that in today's world where companies and corporations can be a little, especially casinos, can be a little hesitant to give people too much information. It amazed me that they allowed them to make the movie. One of my favorite parts about it, I think, is similar to Rounders. It tells the story. This kid who's just who's just good at math. Kevin Spacey finds him, realizes he has a talent. He, unlike Mike McDermott, where it starts with him at a high, goes down and has to build his way up. I think 21 is kind of a different character arc where he builds himself up over the movie, and then he kind of has that one session where he bets everything, loses, and then Kevin Spacey gets in his face, and then he loses it. Lawrence Fishburne beats the crap out of him, and then they hatch the plan. The ending of that movie, did you have any reaction in the way you did to Ocean's 11 when you find out that he was working with the Lawrence Fishburne character? remember at the end you end up finding out that when he was beating him up, he didn't totally beat him up. He said, "Hey, let's hatch this plan."
Yeah,
Did that
I
was
was
that kind of like
shocked.
a mind-blowing moment for
Yes.
you?
Hmm.
So what stands out to you in that movie, similar to the other ones? Cast, is there a particular part of the story that you like?
Um, I guess just like the setting of it
Mm.
and like the storyline, like the whole like gambling aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely,
Mhm.
definitely cool when you can incorporate blackjack into a movie. I don't think that could be done very often.
Mhm.
As fun of a game as blackjack is, I think it can be a little boring to watch in a way. If you're not playing, I think they did a good job of explaining and making blackjack fun to watch people play.
Mhm.
Whereas poker, they have poker on TV all the time. So, moving on from there, Sean, I'll let you kind of take it from here. You have, let's go with Vegas Vacation. Again, not
Yes.
necessarily a gambling related movie, but does
Mhm.
take place in Vegas. Chevy Chase, I believe.
Beverly D'Angelo,
Beverly D'Angelo. I believe Randy Quaid was in
Randy
that, correct?
Quaid. Yep.
Now, was that, I don't remember the order. Was Vegas Vacation prior to Christmas Vacation or was it after? Because I know
I
they made a couple
think
of them.
I think it was
Was it
after.
after? Because I
Pretty
know,
sure.
because I believe cousin Eddie, Randy Quaid, was first. I thought he was first in Christmas Vacation and then Vegas Vacation. I couldn't quite remember. So, what about Vegas Vacation makes it a top five gambling slash casino related movie for you?
Oh, first of all, it's like one of the funniest movies
It's
I've
true.
ever seen.
It's true.
And it's like in my eyes, it's like an instant classic. Um, just how Chevy Chase has this family that's like not like dysfunctional, but just like out there, like goofy, and
It's
they
true.
they all decide to go to Vegas, and like he and just like in Rounders and Ocean's 11, Chevy Chase starts off in the movie with a lot of money,
Mm.
and then he plays it all, and then at the very end he goes to, I believe it was MGM Grand,
Mm.
bets on Keno, and gets lucky.
Yeah, absolutely. So for you, Vegas Vacation, another time. Any particular scene that stands out to you in that movie? I know I've mentioned that in all the movies, but any one particular thing that stands out?
Nah, just the whole movie in
Whole
general.
movie, cool.
Yeah.
So my other one, my one of my others is the movie Casino itself. Early '90s movie with Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro. Um, uh, the guy that plays Hades in Hercules by Disney, can never remember his name. James Woods, who ironically James Woods is actually like not a big poker player, but he plays in a lot of the World Series of Poker events. Just a great movie. Have you seen Casino? It's quite long.
Hmm.
It's a great movie though. I mean, it's a mob movie. It's very much it's Goodfellas in Vegas, pretty much. That's kind of the way I like to describe it. It goes over how Robert De Niro's character Sam Rothstein starts off as like he was just a guy that would bet on sports. He was a bookie and made a lot of money doing that in the Midwest, and then the mob ties or whatever it was, the people that he worked for wanted him to run this mob casino in Vegas. Um, and then he does that for a long time. Joe Pesci's character, who they've been friends since they were kids, he moves to Vegas, tries to start like basically. I've always taken it as De Niro is the clean cut mob guy who tries to do everything. What he's doing isn't exactly legal, but he's not showing it. Whereas Pesci is the other side. He's the guy that just runs around stealing money and killing people that don't like what he does and stuff. So, interesting ending the way it's handled. Um, Spoiler alert: Joe Pesci's character tries to blow up Robert De Niro's character with a car bomb, and then eventually the mob takes out Joe Pesci's character because they knew it was him. So, a great movie. It's long. It's like 2.5 to 3 hours long, but
Yep.
it's a good movie. There are parts of it that get a little slow. Me personally, I like it for the gambling scenes. There's like an entire 20 minutes of the movie just they talk about how the way a casino operates, from the dealers to the boxman to the floorman to the all the way up to the casino manager and everything. So they touch base on a lot of ways in which a casino is run. So that's obviously the movie's called Casino. So if you have a chance, if obviously those of you out there listening, thank you for tuning in. By the way, if you've been able to stick with us here, and as always, like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, like us on Facebook as well. So, Sean, for you, moving on, I know you have The Hangover, which when you told me you had that, I completely forgot. Great choice.
Hmm.
Again, not a gambling movie, but takes place in Vegas. So, what made you put that on the list?
Just like Vegas Vacation, it's just a hilarious movie where you got a group of friends getting together for Doug's bachelor party, and they're all on the roof, and then they get roofie, and just everything goes downhill from there. It's just funny and a great movie, and they show a lot of spots in Vegas in that movie. Cool.
Absolutely, and I agree. It is hilarious. I think the casting in that movie was done very well. Bradley Cooper, Ed Helms, Zach Galifianakis. Um, One of the things that Ken Jeong, who is the little Chinese guy,
Hmm.
Mr. Chow, kind of like Ocean's 11, spawned two sequels, of which I personally, the second one's okay. I think Hangover 3 is hilarious as well. That movie also sort of taking place in Vegas, but Hangover mostly in Vegas more than it is in the third movie. So, ironically, kind of like the Ocean's movies as well. First one was in Vegas, second one had nothing to do with Vegas,
Hmm.
third one brings it back. So, I think one of my favorite scenes in that movie is the scene with the cop car when Ed Helms is on the phone, the baby's crying, and they're trying to get away from the dude with the bat.
Hmm.
I laugh hysterically when Ed Helms is like on the phone with his wife trying to make stuff up. It's just that movie through and through. I think is absolutely hilarious, just like Vegas Vacation. So, for me, my fifth movie, my fifth that I had written down here, Ocean's 13. I really like Ocean's 13. Al Pacino as the big baddie this time in the movie that they have to go up against because he originally was partnered with God, you'd think I like these movies so much, you'd think I would remember. Ruben, who's like the main, not the main guy for the Ocean Squad, but the guy that kind of funds them and
Hmm.
everything. He kind of backstabs Ruben, so Al Pacino's character, they spend the whole movie trying to obviously take down his casino. By the way, that casino that they build in that movie, totally fake, all CG, but it is not awesome, isn't it? Where like the three spirals,
Yeah.
so cool. So that's my fifth movie. Again, it's related to Vegas. Not a whole lot of gambling going on. Um, I like the storyline. Not too much of a reveal like Ocean's 11 was, where it kind of blew your mind that how they pulled it off. This movie kind of just laid it out there for you. The one thing that was shocking at the end of that movie, you find out that the FBI agent is Linus's dad, Matt Damon's character's dad. So and you know what's funny? They talk about his dad through all three episodes. They bring this FBI guy in, and I remember the first time I watched it, I didn't think anything of it, and then you
Hmm.
find out that's his father. So when you watch all three movies in succession, it kind of makes sense. But I actually saw Ocean's 13 before I saw Ocean's 11. I will
Really?
say,
Wow.
Ocean's 13 was on TNT one like years and years ago, and I saw it first. Then I saw Ocean's 11. I had always wanted to see Ocean's 11, but I said, "Oh, I've never seen any of them," so I watched 13 first,
Hmm.
which is pretty cool because then I think if I watched Ocean's 11's first and then 13, I'd have been a little disappointed with 13, but it was kind of the opposite. So one of my honorable mentions is The Gambler, which you have on your list. So great movie with Mark Wahlberg. Kind of like Rounders, the ups and downs of being someone who likes to gamble. Even though for Mark Wahlberg, it's not really a job; it's more or less an obsession.
Yep.
So what draws you to that movie? What do you like about that?
Just everything, the storyline about how he plays this English
Mhm.
professor and meets one of his students, becomes friends with her, and then they kind of go on this like, what do you want to call it? Like a
Journey trip,
journey together,
yeah.
pretty much. And then just the ending is awesome. How he owes or technically three different guys like a lot of
Mhm.
money, and then wins and
Yes.
pays them all at once.
Yes, John Goodman plays one of the guys that he owes money to. There's a scene in that movie with between he and John Goodman at like John Goodman's like club or whatever it is, or like a bar somewhere, and Goodman goes into this whole thing about he goes like any idiot knows that you buy a hat when you have because Mark Wahlberg talks about how one time he was up like $2 million at like a game of something, and John Goodman is like any idiot knows, or I think he says asshole. Any asshole knows that you're up $2 million. You step away, you buy a house with a whatever 30-year mortgage, you put the rest away. So he goes into this whole thing about how people can get really stupid when they win a lot of money. Like, and his whole thing for Mark Wahlberg is, if you're gonna loan money from me to try to win more to pay the Asian guy back, you better be smart about it. And I agree. It's awesome how he just walks up, puts it all down on blackjack, and then when he wins, he goes, cool, all that money goes to those two guys.
Yeah.
And then John Goodman pulls up in the car next to him. He goes, hey, there's some leftovers. And he's like, nah, no, screw you. I'm done.
Yeah.
So,
keeps
yeah.
running.
So another movie that I didn't see until just like maybe a year or two ago. So it had been out for a while before I saw it. You actually were the one that mentioned it to me. You said, oh, you got to watch it. It's such a good movie with Mark Wahlberg. And I watched it and I loved it. So anything else that you have there? You do have the TV show Las Vegas, which I never saw. So anything about that?
Back in the day, it was actually one of my favorite shows right under Survivor. But great cast on that show. James Caan was in it. Josh Duhamel, James LaSure. It's about like these employees that work at a fake Vegas casino in Montecito, and through each episode it shows you pretty much what casinos deal with on a daily basis, how people will try and cheat and like pocket cards or steal people's chips and stuff like that, and it's just really cool. And there's like side stories within the show, which is really neat.
Cool. And I definitely think I haven't had a chance to see it. And I don't think it's on any of the streaming services. I look for it from time to time because you've always mentioned it to me. It's definitely something I'd be interested in. And I think, even at the time it was on, a lot of shows were like cop shows, like Law and Order and stuff. I can imagine at the time it was on, it was probably very fresh for television.
Yeah.
Because, like nowadays you've got all the police shows, you've got all these hospital shows, to see a casino and have similar storylines, I think is really cool. So if anyone out there has seen that show or has seen any of these movies, feel free to let us know. Like the video, subscribe on YouTube, send us a comment. If you have any other gambling or casino related movies out there that you can think of, please feel free to send them along. Let us know. One other thing before we move on to our secondary topic, I do have Casino Royale with Daniel Craig, the James Bond movie, as an honorable mention. Great movie. Obviously, a part of it is about poker, but that's only like a chunk of the movie. The rest of it is just typical James Bond stuff. But a great remake. The original movie from, I believe, the 60s did actually not take place around poker. I believe it took place, I think Baccarat was actually the game that they played in that movie. But obviously the 007 James Bond Casino Royale came out in the late 2000s, and Texas Hold'em was big at that time. So they decided to go with that. Mads Mikkelsen is the bad guy. He does a great job as Le Chiffre, and the only reason I remember all this because I literally just watched it 2 nights ago. Le Chiffre, the bad guy, Mads Mikkelsen. Obviously, if those of you who are Star Wars fans, it was awesome to see him get into a Star Wars movie in Rogue One. Great actor. Daniel Craig, of course, amazing as James Bond. In my opinion, I think he's the best Bond that there's been. So just another honorable mention, gambling-related movie. So, Sean, moving on to our secondary topic. Obviously, we are in May now, not too far away from the beginning of the World Series of Poker. Before we get into the World Series, I want you to, obviously in episode 1 we touched on this a little bit, I want you to take an opportunity to tell your Vegas story and your Daniel Negreanu meet and greet story. So, first, before we get into the Negreanu thing, just talk about Vegas in general. I've never been. We just did, our first episode was totally based on Atlantic City casinos. Talk about Vegas. What do you like about Vegas? What didn't you like? What places would you recommend? The floor is all yours.
Oh man, so Vegas is amazing. It's like Atlantic City on steroids. Like everything's bigger and better in Vegas and brighter. Everything's open all night pretty much. Like you can go up to a bar and get drinks like at 3-4 in the morning, whereas in AC, most bars close at 2. And in Vegas, you're actually allowed to walk on the strip with a drink and not get arrested or anything. Whereas in AC, as far as right now, you're not allowed to do that on the boardwalk. But I think they're working towards it.
They are working towards it. I believe back in mid to late April, there was a article that came out. I think it was a Press of AC article that came out that said they are looking to do that, and from what I heard, it could be as early as this summer they will allow that. So, I mean, listen, let's be honest, people do it anyway. Let's be honest. People put it in a canteen, people put it in something, and they walk around with it. Like, it happens already. I think if you can tell, if people behave, I think it'll do well.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple places, last episode we talked about it. Tell everyone, where did you stay? What did you like about where you stayed?
So the first night I stayed at the Cosmopolitan, which is a really nice, like vibrant, fancy kind of casino. And then the rest of the week I stayed at Hard Rock, which is really cool. It's off the strip, so it's kind of like by itself, which is really neat. And then right across the street from that, there's a what was it called? It was a famous German restaurant. There's one in Philly, I think. Brauhaus.
Brauhaus? Okay.
Brauhaus,
Yep,
yes.
that would be it.
And it was really cool. And then I think my favorite casino in Vegas is Rio. Not only because that's where I met Negreanu, but just because the place is huge and there's like at least 2 or 3 different like big areas of like slot machines and gambling and stuff. And actually, if you want me to get to that Danny Negreanu story.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll touch on that, and then I do have a couple of other questions for you. So, I do want to ask you what you liked, what you did like about the Rio, which you kind of touched on it already. But you had the opportunity to be there in July during the World Series of Poker, which is my dream to be there at that time, even though I hate the heat, so I don't know how well I would do. But basically, you were there during the World Series. I believe it was the $50,000 Poker Players Championship was ongoing. I remember telling you, Negreanu's there. He's currently in whatever place. I think they were down to like the final 10 players or something like that. So you had the opportunity to go up and say hi. So I know you talked about it, but go a little more in depth into your meet and greet with Danny Negreanu.
So I Ubered from Hard Rock over to Rio and then got out and it had like advertisements, posters everywhere saying, WSOP tournament. And I actually had to ask someone, where is it going on? And they showed me where. I walked down this hallway, went into the ballroom, and it was like this huge room like with all these like lights and poker tables, and all you hear is the chips. It was so cool. It was like watching it on TV, how you can hear it on TV.
Yep.
It was just everywhere. And then I walked to like towards the end of the room, and that's where the Players Championship was going on. And there was an area where fans were standing up on kind of like not like bleachers, but like kind of like steps in a way. And then I was on the carpet, like literally right in front of the table. And he was getting ready for break. They were bagging the chips up, I think.
Yeah, probably bagging chips, or I think if I remember correctly, you told me it was like probably like a dinner break, like a 1 hour break or something like that. Yeah.
So he gets up and I was like, "Yo, Danny," and he looks over and I'm like, "Yo, can I get a picture with you?" And he was like, "Yeah, after I go pee pee." So,
which is totally how I can see him explain, based on following Danny on Instagram and wherever else. I can totally see him phrasing it that way.
So after he got back, he came up to the rail and shook my hand, got a picture with me, and was talking to us a little bit about poker. It was really cool to see.
Very cool. I remember when you sent me the picture. I said to you, you got to try to get a picture with him, and you sent me the picture, and I couldn't believe you did it. That's like he's my, I know he's yours too. He's my favorite poker player of all time, hands down. So, kind of going back to Vegas itself. Like I said, I've never been there. You have. What would you recommend? Any places you'd recommend to anybody out there that's listening?
Oh yeah, there's a few places. If you're looking for like fancy casinos, Bellagio, Wynn, Cosmopolitan, or if you're looking for a place to have a good time, like some fun bars, Flamingo, they have a Margaritaville inside that I think is actually better than the one in AC,
really?
In my opinion.
Okay.
And actually at their bar, they have beer pong tables set up. And I remember after my brother's reception in 2017 when we were there, we actually played pong till like 1 a.m. It was so much fun.
Very cool.
It's a good time.
Very cool. Any Any places that you ate? I mean, I know you mentioned bars and stuff, but are there any restaurants that stand out to you?
Yeah. The night before the wedding, we went to I forget the name of it. It's where the big Ferris wheel is. Um, there's like a name to it, but there's a restaurant in there called Yard House
Okay.
that was really good.
Okay. Very cool. I
Mhm.
do remember you sending me pictures of you did the Ferris wheel, correct?
Yeah,
I remember
yeah.
you sending that stuff over.
The
So
Link. It was called the Link.
the link is
Yeah,
the restaurant or was the casino?
the Link. Well, there's a casino within it called the Link.
Oh, okay.
The Link Casino, I think it is.
Okay.
But the actual like the whole plaza is called the Link.
Okay. So of all the places you went to tie into our Atlantic City conversation from earlier, favorite casino in Vegas. I think you went over it already, but I'll ask you. I'll ask you outright.
Rio.
Rio.
Yeah.
So what about it? What is the one thing that stands out? Not World Series of Poker. Let's just say, for example, World Series of Poker. You're there any other time of the year. What stands out to you? What do you like about the Rio
The casino.
casino
Like the
itself?
casino floor.
Casino
Yeah.
floor itself.
Yeah.
And obviously, we mentioned in episode 1 that we're chip collectors. I know you got a bunch of your chips from Vegas. So, so speaking of Vegas, we'll move into our secondary topic today. World Series of Poker upcoming here, just not too long from now. End of May, I believe May 30th is the start date. Usually the event starts with like an employees event. They let Rio and WSOP employees play in a tournament. It's usually like a cheap buy-in, like it's usually like a couple $100. That kind of kicks everything off, and then everyone kind of hits the ground running. From what I come to understand, by the way, if you like us on Facebook or go ahead and like us on Facebook, you'll see an article that we shared a few weeks ago, written by Card Player Magazine, who are the best in the business when it comes to covering poker. It was just an article going over everything you need to know about the WSOP this year. Obviously, this year being the 50th annual World Series of Poker, absolutely incredible that it is the 50th annual. What amazes me about that is the fact that Doyle Brunson played in the first ever World Series of Poker, and I believe, even though he announced last year, I think it was, that he was going to be retiring, I think you have to have him come out and play.
Especially for the 50th.
Especially for the 50th. To be playing poker at the level that he's played it for 50 years, I don't think there are too many guys left, unfortunately, that played in that first WSOP. So to have him and to have him so active in the poker world, I think you absolutely have to have him out. So actually, I do apologize. It was May 28th where it kicks off. July 16th it ends. So over a month and a half, which is the coolest part about it. You know, I think a lot of people think of the World Series of Poker as the main event because that's all they used to show on TV. They used to show some other events, but so many people, this is what I love about Rounders, Matt Damon, and this is what cracks me up, something I wanted to mention earlier. Matt Damon starts the movie with 30 grand. If you wanted to play, his whole thing the whole time is wanting to chase the dream to play in Vegas. At the time in 97, 30 grand would have easily gotten you a plane ride out there. You could have played in the main event for 10 grand. You could have gotten a hotel room. You could have played all little side events and still come home with a ton of money. Like he could have taken 20 grand, flown out there, stayed out there, played the main event, played some other events, gotten a room, fed himself, and he would have been fine. So I think that's the main flaw in that movie.
Yeah.
The whole movie he talks about wanting to, like, oh yeah, or like Kanish gives him grief for like you chased dreams of playing at the World Series. He could have done it without going through that. So it's always something that I find funny. But anyway, the Rio is hosting again this year, May 28th. It kicks off. Couple of changes for the World Series this year, Sean. And I think this is actually something that we started doing. I don't remember if we've done in our home games or not. There's a big blind ante now in the World Series. So the big blind posts, the small blind posts, and then the big blind also posts an ante on top. So you know how as you get later in a tournament, it's big blind, small blind, everyone posts an ante. Now the big blind is going to have to post another ante on top of that. So what do you think, I think we did that once in a home game, but what do you think about that, having to have the big blind pay the blind, the table ante, and the big blind ante? Do you think it's going to change anything? And every No Limit Hold'em event is using this.
I don't even get why they're doing it. It's like speed it up.
It's a way to speed it up. It's it's a from what I just to quote the article, it says the big blind ante is a fundamental rethinking of what the ante is. This ante isn't for the ante in this format is no longer a specified amount that each player pays each hand. Now it's a specified amount that each player pays each round. So it gives the opportunity, and actually I think I may have even worded it wrong. I may have worded it as everyone pays an ante. I think what it actually is, let me see. I may have been wrong. Um, Yeah, actually, I think what it is the table doesn't play an ante anymore. It's the big blind, the small blind, then the big blind antes, and I think that's it. So like the whole table doesn't ante like they used to, but it is a way to speed the game up. But do you
Mm.
think it changes anything? Do you think it changes the way someone plays in a tournament? Because obviously tournament games are so much different from cash games like we usually play. Do you think it changes anything?
It could maybe have someone bets. Um, like maybe, let's say the big blind is short stacked, and if they have to pay more, maybe they'll be more conservative
Mhm.
with their chips. You know.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things that the article mentions is that if they have to post, an ante plus a big blind, you kind of have to know where you're at.
Mm.
Definitely have to be very mindful of your chip stack. Of course, I don't think that's difficult for anyone at the WSOP, especially as the event goes on. Whatever tournament it is, they have the TV showing the leaderboards and everything. So.
Mm.
Some of the other things that are going on here, I don't remember if they're utilizing a shot clock or not. But just to touch on that, Sean, what do you think of a shot clock in poker, giving someone 30 seconds? The dealer presses a button, they have 30 seconds to make a decision.
Oh, I don't like that at all.
I
Because me personally, I know I try and take as much time as I can get.
This is the guy who we have to call a clock on in home games, folks. I hate to say it. It's just a friendly home game among friends, but I kid you not, there are sometimes we have to call a clock on him, and literally we have to give him like a minute. I'm not kidding. But yeah, so something that you don't think you would like very much
Nah,
in a tournament
because
setting.
if someone feels like they're being rushed, they might make a huge mistake that could send them packing.
Yeah, and it's definitely something you have to keep in mind of. Not only if you have a tournament where it's doing the big blind ante, but it's also doing a shot clock. You really have to, think
Mm.
about it quick. But I know one of the complaints that people have are the guys, and I can't remember his name, but there was some. I think it was the dude that busted out ninth in the final table last year. I watched the first day of the final table. That friggin' guy, whatever his name was, literally he wouldn't. I mean, most people in poker these days don't touch their cards and look at them until it's their turn anyway. But this guy would literally wait till it got to him, look at his cards, put them down, sit there for like 10 seconds, and then fold. Like, it irritated me. I wanted to jump through the screen and strangle the guy. Like, I think it's going to help people like that. Not if,
Mm.
like, you think about like, you think about your hand. If someone goes all in behind you, you sit there and think about it. This guy was literally just sitting there every single hand. Even if he knew he was going to fold, he was just going to take his grand old time. So I really actually like the idea of a shot clock in certain situations. Um, and I know in events that use a shot clock, it runs down and then they have these little cards that you throw to the dealer if you want extra time. I think in certain events, especially the main event, if you get to the final table, I don't think it's necessary, especially if someone goes all in and it means the difference between third place and second place to be heads up. I think it's something that you need to not have to
Yeah.
give people the opportunity to think. So, um, some of these other things that are mentioned here in this article, some things that I'm actually excited to see. They're doing, and something that I would love to do if I was out there. They're doing a Big 50, which is a $500 buy-in, $5 million guarantee, no limit hold'em event that's running in from May 30th to June 1st. So it's one of the first events that they have. The first buy-in of every participant is rake free, which means you don't have to pay whatever the rake is for the event. But I think it's a good way to get people involved at the World Series because let's be honest, people like you and me are not going to be able to play the $10,000 main event. Hell, I can't even afford to really go out there and play the $1,500, $2,000 event. So something that's a $500 event would be good. Sean, I'll ask you if you were to play in a World Series of Poker event. Let's be realistic. Let's say you were to go out there and play in a $500 event. What would your thought process be once you got over the excitement of sitting down at a World Series of Poker? What would you do to hunker in to try to place as best as you could?
Mm, just relax and Just play like I do at home with you guys. Pretty
True.
much.
True. And I mean, certainly the one thing that I think maybe separates a tournament from what we do sometimes is we play for cash. We do cash games, and sometimes you don't have to be mindful of making moves. I did get an opportunity to play in a Borgata Poker Open event one time. I think it was a couple years ago. I played a Summer Poker Open event. And the one thing that I learned right off the bat was, you know, you can bluff. There's times to bluff, but you have to bluff in certain situations in tournament poker because it's all about building up your chip stack, not necessarily as quickly as you can, but about building up your chip stack to at least stay at the, I would say, at least the top half of the board of who's left. If you start to creep down towards the bottom and closer to being busted, that can really change things for you. Whereas when you play cash, you're trying to win, but you're not set to a clock. You're not trying to outlast people. So, so some of the other events that are coming up for the World Series this year, bracelet winners only, which is going to be anyone that has ever won a World Series of Poker bracelet in the history of the event. So over 50 years. Doesn't matter how many. If you've won one, you can play in it, which I think is pretty cool. They're having a mini main event, which is $1,000 buy-in, but they still give you the same starting stack and blind levels as the main event. So for $1,000, I believe the starting stack is 50,000 now for the main event. So essentially, it's just a cheaper main event, which I think is really cool. And the levels are a little shorter. Kicks off July 1st. The big thing this year, they are doing 89 different bracelet events. So the most ever in the history of the World Series of Poker. 89 bracelets, never that many given out. A couple of them are online, which is pretty cool. Actually, you can play them if you live in Jersey, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
They do have, I believe if you live in Jersey, you can participate in some of the online World Series of Poker events. And then obviously there's the New Jersey online something. It's like the World Championship of Online Poker, spring something of online poker that they have every year. So, some of these other events, Sean, things that you and I could afford to do, $400 Colossus, the big $500 event that we talked about. I think, no, we didn't talk about that, but $600, for some events, some of these, and then all the way up, of course, to the high roller event, the $50,000, $100,000 high roller. So and it's amazing that people can even afford to play that. It's really insane. And then of course something that I would love to do. They do these daily deep stacks for like $150, $200. They're just cash tournaments. They're not bracelet events. So, and then of course there's the main event kicking off on July 3rd. And one of our future episodes is actually, we're just going to sit here, watch the World Series of Poker main event on TV, and we're just going to talk about it as it goes on. So, Sean, just to talk about it, we'll do an episode based on previewing the main event. But what do you want to see in the main event? Anyone in particular that stands out? Obviously, Danny Negreanu is someone we always pull for, but is there anyone else that you can think of that you want to see do well, not only in the main event, but in the World Series as a whole?
Phil Ivey.
Phil Ivey is a good one. I believe last year he sat out the main event. I can't remember if he played the whole World Series or not, or if he just sat out the main event, but definitely would be awesome to see Phil Ivey come back. Me personally, I'm going to go for a local guy, Joe McKeon, who was the main event champion, I believe, back in 2015. Mm-hmm. If I remember correctly, I think he wore a Sixers jersey when he won. I think he won and he's a good guy, actually. And someone that I used to work with at a previous job that I had was like his best friend, or it was something like I think it was his best man at his wedding was Joe McKeon's roommate at one point or something like that. Something like that. And it was really cool to talk about that with him because he got to meet him a couple times and stuff like that. But a local guy, Joe McKeon, who is very successful. He's won the main event. Last year, I believe he won the $10,000 limit hold'em. So he's won the two biggest events at no limit and limit. And then I believe this year at I believe he was at Harrah's, Atlantic City, for the circuit event back a couple months ago. I believe he won a ring event there too. So I think I put on Twitter last year that Joe McKeon needs to be in the running for discussion as one of the best poker players of at least the last couple years, considering he's won so many high caliber events. So Sean, anything else that you can think of? Anything, NBA, NHL, anything you want to touch on before we wrap up episode 2?
Yeah, I guess. I've been watching the NHL and NBA playoffs a lot. I'm a huge Golden Knights fan. But
First day at Ocean last year, did bet on the Knights
I
to
did.
win the Eastern Conference. Unfortunately, didn't quite
Yeah.
hit.
Almost. I think if they would have gotten past the Sharks.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're both big hockey fans, and I actually officiate hockey on the side. Unfortunately, a bit of an error by the officials, not necessarily costing Vegas, but certainly hurting Vegas's opportunity to get to the second round, get a little closer to paying you off. Unfortunately, it didn't. How about the Hurricanes? Hurricanes coming out of left field.
They're like a Cinderella team this
Really
year.
is.
It's crazy.
Really is knocking
Crazy.
off the Capitals in the first round, dispatching of the Islanders quickly in the second round. And obviously, as Flyers fans, it's nice to see the Penguins got eliminated pretty early. Tampa Bay, best
Getting
record,
swept.
one of the best teams of this century since 2000 and 2001. One of the best teams that we've seen in the last 20 years getting knocked out. And it's just, it goes to show you, I've said it as a hockey person for a long time, the President's Trophy winning team almost never wins the Stanley Cup. It just doesn't happen. Because sometimes you just can't sustain that success into the playoffs. So, and Carolina is a prime example of a team that just got hot at the right time. So, NBA, anything? Sixers, Sixers, since we're,
Sixers are
sort of-
looking good.
Sixers looking all right. Anything else in the NBA? I know you have a beef with the defending champs.
I don't want to see the Warriors win.
So who would you want to?
3-0.
Who would you want to?
Probably the Sixers.
Sixers, if they
Yeah.
could.
Yeah.
Obviously, still a bit of a challenge, still a bit of a mountain to climb for them. But so I think that's going to do it for us here, episode 2 of the Pocket Aces podcast. Thank you all so much for tuning in. If you haven't been able to do so already, hop on over, check out episode 1. There's 2 parts, parts 1 and 2, where we discussed each and every Atlantic City casino as they currently are, as well as some of their past iterations. And as always, feel free to give us a like, subscribe to us, give us a comment, anything you heard today, any future topics you want us to touch on. Next episode, we're going to do some WSOP coverage, since by the time we record that episode, the WSOP should be running. We'll do NHL and NBA playoffs. We'll also take a look at some early NBA and NHL odds for the 1920 season. We'll also take a look at some of the NFL odds as well, since the NFL odds for next year, the futures odds have already been up for quite some time. So we'll take a look and see where some teams stand. I think as of the recording of this episode, Kansas City is the favorite, with the Patriots in second to win the Super Bowl. So we'll take a look at that. We'll touch base on some sports betting and plenty of other topics in the world of gambling and casinos. So thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.